field, had the left brain training, but now are bridges for people to enhance this understanding.
Mhm.
And I just think it's a really big mission. And I think, you are an incredible, unique person for being on this journey and being brave enough to talk about it every day. So, yeah,
Thank you.
you're
Thank
awesome.
you.
So I love that you recognize the self love trend. And
Yes.
I joke about this a lot because it seems to be a hot topic right now, doesn't it?
Yes, it does.
So I think the most important thing for the listeners to understand is why this really shouldn't be a trend. Like, talk to me about why this is actually the key to fulfillment.
Yes, absolutely. Well, I guess I could start with sort of my personal story about the self-love trend, if we have enough time for that.
Yeah, of course.
Okay. So let's see. Back in 2011, I met someone. We were in a relationship together. We loved each other very much. And then, we were going to get married. So I was engaged and I was excited, but I was also very scared. And at the very same time, I was going through all this myofascial release stuff and kind of learning this totally new way to relate to my body. And John Barnes would talk about loving yourself, and I was like, yes, that's what I'm doing, and all this stuff. And our relationship started to go downhill, and I ultimately decided to cancel it at that time in my life, cancel the wedding, and that was a really hard time in my life. And I remember just looking at the ring on my finger that he had given me and thinking to myself, wow, I almost committed my whole self to this other person, and I never spent time committing to myself, and loving myself. And all of a sudden, in my mind, I'm like, oh, I'm gonna marry myself. I'm gonna love myself. And then I thought to myself, oh, nobody's thought of this, so I'm gonna Google it. So I Google it, and there was this one woman who had this sort of self-marriage program online. And since I'm a learner and I love doing programs, and I think I was just so hurting that I needed something, I signed up for her program and I went through this whole self-marriage program. And it was really cool. So there was a ritual and you did a commitment, and I actually even got my friends involved, and I had myself like a pre-commitment party, so basically a bachelorette party. And I invited all my friends and I told them about self-love and what it was all about. And at that time, nobody was really talking about that, and I was definitely way out there with that whole idea. But my friends were just happy that I wasn't like lying in my bed crying anymore. So they went along with me and supported me. So we went to a restaurant and we did some bowling, and I gave everybody a mirror because I was also starting to get into Louise Hay's mirror work.
Yes,
So
I know
anybody
about
that's
that.
not familiar with that, basically you look into a mirror, tell yourself that you love yourself, and kind of really look into your own eyes and see what comes up. And so I gave everybody a little mini mirror, like a favor, and I put a little card in there, and I told them about that. And years later, my friends would send me a random message and say, "Oh my gosh, I tried that mirror thing. That was the hardest thing I ever did. I had no idea that just looking at my own self and saying I love you was going to be so hard." And I said, "I know." Um, and now everybody's all about the self love. It's like the most exciting thing on the planet.
Well, let's hope that people really embrace it as a necessity for moving forward to give from a place of overflow versus like trying to give and give and give until you're
Mhm.
on your reserves and burned out, right? So,
Exactly.
yeah,
So,
especially as healers and practitioners, and we really need to work
yeah.
on giving from that overflow so that we can keep giving and keep doing all these amazing things in the world.
Absolutely. I think that, when I was going through that whole process, it's very counter to society. Society tells you you must sacrifice yourself for the good of others. Um, and I won't get into religions or anything, but I think that does have to do with some of the amazing religions that we have followed from now until now, from then until now.
Yeah.
Um, but to sacrifice yourself for someone else isn't really going to work anymore because it's like it doesn't give you a chance to express fully who you are because you're too busy trying to express fully for everybody else. And you just can't. You can't express somebody else's unique individuality. And the only way everybody is going to be unique and be able to express their true selves is if we are brave and we stand up and we say, I'm going to do that for me and I'm going to stop doing it for you because I'm setting you free to do it for yourself too.
Yes, you're talking about such an important thing, and it is about empowering other people. So if we're constantly doing for,
Mm-hmm.
giving, being whoever we think we need to be for everybody else, we're actually not empowering them to step into their own brilliance.
Nope.
And of course, there's a time and place for helping people, right?
Yep.
But it's the way that you do it. I think
Correct.
that's really important. And yeah, this is a really, really important topic, like how you go about doing that. And plus, listen, you could do it the way that we're talking about, give until you're burned out. But what is that's going to lead to is sickness, illness, worse than that,
Yep.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So you can
Um,
do it like that for a temporary amount of time until your body says, hey, can't do that like that anymore.
Exactly. And it's interesting that you say that because, during the time that I was having all those issues with my back and my jaw and everything, that session when the therapist worked on my jaw, it wasn't just that I felt all that pain. The other thing that came up and the awareness that came up was two words: I can't.
Mm,
And I realized that at that point in my life, I had never told anybody that I can't before. And it's essentially sort of like saying no, like
right.
learning how to have boundaries and say no. And then just to admit I can't. And that was really when I started realizing, the path that I was going down and how I should not be going down that path at all.
Yes, I get it. I totally get that. So I have to chuckle now because when we're getting ready to interview guests, we like to be prepared. So we ask them, what they really feel turned on about talking about on these shows. And Nicole, when I read this from you on your form, I laughed out loud. So tell everyone what it means to learn how to treat yourself like a baby bunny.
No problem. So basically, as I was going through this whole self love and look inside, love your life journey, you get to some pretty dark parts in your life that you don't necessarily love about yourself. Whether that's things that you've done, or whether that's things you think about yourself, or your physical body, or whatever. You start getting into these parts that you don't really like, and you push them down. Or you yell at yourself about the things that you do, like, oh, why did I do that again? And it's all this like negative self talk. We all have it. And I was really struggling with this negative self talk, and I was really struggling with releasing certain parts of my body, trying to force things to happen, basically. And I stopped and I said, well, I'm trying to do this self love thing. And what do I feel like unconditional love for? What do I feel really good about? All right, I feel good about babies. And then I'm like, oh, baby bunny. I feel good about baby bunnies, right? So I put in my mind a baby bunny. And then I started talking to the baby bunny like I talk about myself. And what did that baby bunny do? He ran away and hid in the cave. And I was like, well, of course he's going to run away. The terrible things I'm saying in my mind. And so I realized that I needed to be a lot more gentle on myself and a lot more forgiving and a lot more understanding and a lot more of just holding space and being kind and being patient. Because when I did that in my mind's eye, I felt that baby bunny would be able to come forward. And that baby bunny to me really represents me, my soul, who I truly am, my light. And sometimes that light can get scared away. And so I felt like I needed to treat myself like a baby bunny until that light could come out and it could shine a little bit here and there and get more confidence, and for me to continue to support it so that it could shine as bright as it could be.
Yeah, that's fantastic. The way that I work that in some of my own work and workshops is that, boy, you're so right about how you talk to yourself. The negative self talk is damaging.
Mm-hmm.
And we would never speak to our best friend like that. We would never speak to a small child like that or a baby bunny. So, actually, doing a meditation about it and maybe coming up with your own version of what your baby bunny is. I mean, and I often use the vision of taking a small child by the hand and how you would treat that child, talk to it, how you would support it, and all.
Yep,
We're so tough on ourselves. Gosh, worse than tough some days, right?
absolutely.
Yeah.
And there's no need for it. There's no need.
No.
Where does that help us get? Nowhere. It really just limits us, because basically what we're trying to tell ourselves all the time is you can't do that because you're this or you're that. And it's like, no, you know?
Yeah, trash talking yourself is not only a huge waste of time, like I said before, it's damaging. So if you're a fellow healer or a writer or an artist, and if you know me, you know by now that I believe that every human is all three of those things. You're going to want to get good at shutting that trash talk down and replacing it with something that aligns with your bigger dreams and goals better. And so that's like number one. So if I wanted to tell my listeners the number one tool to making this transformation of healing, it would be to recognize the thoughts in your head and how you're talking to yourself. It's such a big deal.
It's true.
Yeah. So okay, now I totally get the baby bunny. I'm happy. I'm happy that you told me that story.
You know what? It's laughable and it makes people remember it. So it's like
Yes.
when you're having a crappy day, you're gonna remember Baby Bunny.
Yes. Oh my God, totally. I love it. And I did. I had when I read it, I had an instant picture of something that was soft and gentle and that I needed to treat a certain way. So it's,
Yep.
yeah, really fantastic. So if you're listening to us or maybe just joining in, it's the bottom of the hour, and I'm talking to Nicole Russo, and you can find her and all of her amazing programs at lookinsideloveyourlife.com. And so I wanted to continue the conversation by asking you, so, we've talked so far about some tools, and we talked a little bit about myofascial release, and maybe we'll get into how people can self-treat in a minute. We talked about the mirror work, which I did want to make a quick comment about because it's powerful. And we just talked about self-talk. All these things I think are tools. So if I was going to ask you, Nicole, what would be one go-to practical tool that you would even just like to teach the listeners right now, if you were wanting them to walk away with a tool today that they could use?
For healing and self-love.
Well, okay, yes, of course, because I think any tool is going to be about that, but maybe even something as practical as if they have a desk job.
Okay, absolutely.
And we could do
So,
both if you want.
all right. So here's one great tool. Um, if you have a tennis ball hanging around, um, one thing that can happen when you're having a desk job is you're sitting all the time. And lots of things get tight, but one thing that you could do while you're sitting at your desk is you could loosen up your hamstrings with this tennis ball. So I actually have a YouTube video on my website, Look Inside, Love Your Life, and it's 5 easy tricks for a tight desk body. And it may be easier for us visual people if you pop over there at some point to check it out. But you can use the tennis ball on your hamstrings. So basically, you just